I love you, but you are not serious people.
Hey, welcome back to ScreenCrush. I'm Ryan Airy, and let's talk about the ending of Succession. This series finale was filled with hidden meaning, symbolism, and the ending was actually foreshadowed all the way back in the first episode of this series. I am so excited to talk to you guys about this ending. I love this show. We've always wanted to cover it on the channel, and we have got some new insights into this ending that will make you see this series in a whole new light. So let's talk about the ending of Succession, and obviously, massive spoilers for the entire series are ahead. This episode opened just like the first episode of the series, with Kendall walking into Wayster certain that he was going to imminently take over his father's place as CEO, only to learn that his life's ambition is about to be thwarted. Episode 5 this season gave us a similar nod. That episode, just like the pilot, began with Kendall on his way to work and listening to hip-hop. Now in the first episode, the song was the Beastie Boys' An Open Letter to NYC, kind of a love letter to New York as it recovered from 9/11. But in season 4, Kendall was listening to the song Take Over by Jay-Z, and it seemed appropriate. He is ready to take over the company. Now, this is one of the most famous diss tracks ever in hip-hop, when Jay-Z was attacking Nas, and Nas responded with a brutal takedown track called Ether. Ether was so sharp, so pointed, that it's become a verb in hip-hop, to ether someone. So apply that to Succession, where Kendall begins by listening to Take Over, thinking he's on top, but by the end of the series, his dreams have disappeared into the ether. You may have also noticed that there is a hidden meaning in the title of this episode, With Open Eyes. This is taken from a poem by John Berryman called Dream 29, and actually every season finale of this show is named for a line from this poem. The work is about a man named Henry who vividly dreams that he has murdered a woman. He wakes up to find out that he hasn't killed her, but he is haunted by the idea that he has that kind of evil within him. Now, in season 1, the meaning here was obvious, with Kendall being complicit in the death of the waiter. But this series is filled with people who tell themselves that they are good, they're doing the right things for the right reasons, while actually they're all just kind of evil idiots, Kendall especially.
I'm a good guy.
How long was that kid alive before he started sucking in water?
This episode shows him becoming his father in the worst way possible, but we'll talk about that a bit later on. The point is, each of the Roy siblings has the potential to cause careless destruction. Kendall actually killed a man, Roman burned down democracy, and Shiv, well, I'll get to Shiv in just a second. So, in the poem, Henry is haunted by the evil lurking inside of him, and the titular line goes, "Ghastly with open eyes, he attends blind. All the bells say, too late." Now, in the context of the poem, this is about Henry kind of watching himself be evil and not being able to stop himself from committing this evil act. Now, before this episode even aired, a lot of people online were speculating about this title. What's the meaning of eyes? There are a couple of violent eye references in this episode.
There was something about eyes, they just kind of, oof. I don't like to think of all these blobs of jelly rolling around in your head.
You know, I'm cutting heads and harvesting eyeballs.
So the references to eyes and blinding is obviously indicating how Kendall is blind to the truth that he can never be his father. But the more overt reference is to everybody's favorite ocular destructionist, Oedipus. Oedipus was a Greek tragedy where a man inadvertently killed his father and begins having sex with his mother, and when his shame is revealed to him, he blinds himself. Freud famously talked about the Oedipus complex, where every boy wants to grow up to replace his father and possess his mother. And speaking of Oedipus complexes, let's talk about Roman.
I screwed mom for you. That's, you know, it's the dream, right?
Roman does his best to hit for the Oedipus cycle in this series. He has a thing for older women, well, Jerry more specifically, and he spends this season trying to become his dad. He wears his dad's sweater, and when he does his cringy speech rehearsal, he even says,
Don't I perhaps remind you of him?
Roman and Jerry don't get much time this episode, but these two really were Succession's real tragic love story. She's the only person who seems to unlock something vulnerable within him. Even in this episode, when she shows up at Logan's, Roman immediately sits on the floor, like a child, to watch the video of his dad. Just like in the episode Connor's Wedding, Roman naturally reverts to a childlike state when he's feeling vulnerable. It's his instinct to make himself smaller in a world where everyone expects you to be big. The expectation of being powerful is right there in his name, Roman, or as his dad would always call him, Romulus. Romulus famously co-founded Rome with his brother Remus. According to legend, they were raised by a she-wolf in the wild, and as adults, they disagreed on where they should build the location of Rome. Over this disagreement, Romulus ended up killing his brother and went on to become the first king of Rome. So this story had a lot of people speculating that we would see Roman beat Ken and become CEO. But this show has never been about who becomes CEO. It's about the inner sibling rivalry. It's about the desire to become CEO, the desire to succeed. So in a weird way, history does repeat itself. Rome Roman, or Romulus, does kill his brother, not by voting against him or by becoming CEO, but by telling him the truth, by opening his eyes when he says,
We are bullshit.
Roman is, in a twisted way, the only Roy kid with a happy ending. He ends the episode with a smile while he orders Jerry's signature martini. Now, our editor Brianna McLarty pointed out this line from season 1.
So pleased to be out of here. This place was essentially a cage to me.
And now, he's free of the expectation to live up to his father. He can be a rich playboy who stalks parties, making inappropriate jokes, offering $1 million to kids if they can make a shot. And I'm actually cool with Roman getting a happy-ish ending because of all the kids, he's the one who suffered the most, even though he is like a total piece of shit.
My team's playing your team. It's only spicy because if my team wins, they're gonna shoot your team.
See, Roman is the only Roy kid that Logan actually beat as a child, and this really messed him up, so that as an adult, his love language is still violence. This is why, after the funeral, he dives into a crowd of protesters so he can feel pain, feel something other than his own shame. The stitches on his face become a kind of scarlet letter that tells the world that he is emotionally unstable, that he is not fit for the chair. But in the final moments before the vote, he sees his reflection, and of course, he hates what he sees, but he lies to himself, saying that he sees a CEO staring back at him.
Like, this looks fine, so, you know, why isn't it me?
This is the most tragic scene of the episode. Roman is in denial. His eyes are closed as he says,
Why isn't it me? You know? Like,
so Kendall channels his father and chooses violence. He tears open his brother's wounds, physical and emotional, to show him the truth, that he is unfit. He peels back his face like he's forcing his eyes open. And then he uses a hug, which is supposed to be a symbol of love, to hurt his brother, to control him.
We're gonna do good.
teamwork makes the dream work.
Siblings always know how to hurt each other's feelings, especially older siblings who grew up watching the younger ones patch over their vulnerabilities. And here, Kendall betrays his own ideals. Remember how he reacted when Logan slapped Roman?
Hey! No! Don't f***ing touch him!
And Logan immediately backed down. It's like the only time Kendall was able to exert any control over his father. And you get the feeling this is not the first time the older brother stepped in to defend the younger brother. And in this scene, Kendall shows Roman and the world that there was always an evil monster lurking inside of him, just like Henry in that John Berryman poem. In the absence of Logan, Kendall has become Roman's abuser, both physically in this episode and verbally in the last episode.
That's because you f***ed him.
He can't fill his father's shoes, but he can replicate the evil his father inflicted on the world. The kids, especially Kendall, are haunted by Logan's last words to him.
I love you, but you are not serious people.
So after Shiv finds out that Matsson has betrayed her, the siblings have to choose who to back as CEO. And with his father's words ringing in his ears, Kendall says,
We need to get real.
even though Kendall is the first Roy boy to use childish arguments to get what he wants. The final argument about who gets to be CEO boils down to a nuh-uh, dad said fight, when Kendall says that his dad told him that he would be CEO way back when he was 7.
I'm simply saying he said a lot of things, and he said them to me first.
Yeah, and he said it to me last.
I mean, Kendall's full name is Kendall Logan Roy, so he's named after his dad, but not quite. Much like that ambiguous underlining that drove Kendall crazy earlier this season, Logan didn't quite anoint his son as the second coming. So now Kendall is full on trying to anoint himself. The final decision and the anointing happens in the ocean. Now, think about this for a second. Logan didn't like the water, remember?
Dad can't swim.
Yeah, he doesn't even trust water.
But later, we do see Logan swimming when his kids aren't around because he didn't want his kids to see the scars on his back. These scars are probably from an abusive childhood, and he doesn't want to share any vulnerable part of himself with his family. So water, for Logan and the show, represents vulnerability. His brother's story at the funeral expands on this. Logan was stranded on the open sea for days, waiting to die, whereas Kendall has always been drawn toward the water, drawn toward his own vulnerabilities, his own addictions. During his anointment, he perches on a floating dock, much like his dad, bobbing in the sea, while his siblings remain lower than him, like they've come to kiss the ring of the king. But water is also the source of his greatest tragedy and eventual downfall, the drowning of the waiter in season 1. And this season, fan theories abounded that Kendall was going to die or drown. This episode leaned into foreshadowing his death. But again, the drama in this show is not usually literal. Kendall does die when he realizes that he can never take over Wayster. So now let's talk about that board vote when the kids' immaturity finally bubbles to the surface. In the funeral, Shiv told the story about how the kids would play outside their dad's office just to get his attention. And the same thing plays out as they're adults. They bicker and they fight like spoiled brats, trying to get their dad's attention even though he's dead. The board meeting's prologue is even a children's nursery rhyme.
Silence in the courtyard.
Silence in the street.
The biggest fool in England is just about to speak.
It seems like they're being self-deprecating, but this is actually what ends up happening in the meeting. Kendall thinks he's the new emperor, but he has no clothes, or no votes if you prefer. So if you're not paying attention, Shiv's decision does seem to come out of nowhere.
I mean, what the hell is going on?
The most important moment in the episode happens here, just as Kendall is about to formally take his father's chair. He gestures to his siblings like for permission.
It's not a magic chair. Yeah, go ahead.
But notice the way Kendall sits. He doesn't get straight to work. He spins for a second like a little kid. The camera then cuts to his brother and sister. Roman's face reads exactly what he says later on.
I'm telling you this because I know it, okay? We're nothing.
While Shiv sees something at that exact moment. She sees a smug, spoiled brat getting permission to sit in Daddy's chair and spinning around in it. An adult would have leaned forward immediately and gotten to work, but a kid would take the time to play in the chair to spin a little bit. And we know exactly what Shiv was thinking.
You can't be CEO. You can't, because you killed someone.
Though it takes a while for this realization to sink in for her. And when it does, we get this full-blown office fight, which is the true climax of the series, what the show has been building toward for years. Kendall has spent his entire life believing that not only will he inherit the company, but that he is the only person who should inherit the company. That he alone is fit for this machine. At least, this is the lie that he tells himself, that the company needs him, when in fact, he needs the company. Soon, he reveals the truth, that he didn't want the company because he would be good at running it, but because it was his birthright.
I'm the eldest boy!
Which Shiv points out is not true. Connor is the oldest. You may have also noticed that there is a hidden meaning in the title of this episode, With Open Eyes. At its core, this show is really about people who have one thing in common, and it's not greed or lust for power, it's that none of them can ever tell the full truth. They can't have their eyes open. Makes sense since they built their empire on journalism that tells lies.
This means that Macon will be the next president of the United States.
And in this scene, we see that Kendall is able to rewrite history if it suits his personal needs.
You can't, because you killed someone.
That didn't happen. It did not happen. I wasn't even there. It did not happen.
And this moment is such a betrayal to his siblings because the moment he confessed the truth about Andrew Dodds drew him and his siblings closer together than ever.
This sounds like the story of a hero to me. I would have been straight out of there.
And now, like their father, he's refusing to show his vulnerabilities. He won't show them his mental scars. And as the next scene unfolds, Logan's words rang in my ears.
But you are not serious people.
When Shiv takes away his toy, Kendall throws a full-on spoiled rich boy tantrum. Now there's this line.
I'm the eldest boy!
There he's saying the quiet part out loud about why they excluded Shiv to begin with. In the Roy household, being a boy counts like it's feudal Europe. Reminds me a lot of this guy.
It is my birthright.
Then Roman turns his back on him to say that if bloodlines were important, then his kids were basically bastards in their father's eyes because they're adopted. And by extension, Shiv is the only person capable of giving the king an heir. And then they wrestle, just like children.
We used to play outside his office, and I think because we wanted him to hear.
And then Roman finally drops his mask, opens his eyes, and says the truth that they all ignored.
Hey, we are bullshit.
This is something that, deep down, the kids have always known. Their dad treated them like bullshit, so they became bullshit. For Roman, this is liberating. He no longer has to pretend to be a megastar corporate wunderkind. For Kendall, this is the opposite of what his dad told him when he was 7. It's like he's been stabbed in the chest. And speaking of stabbing, let's talk about Shiv. Shiv's real name is Shaban, which is another form of the name Joan, which means God has been gracious. Now, this of course reminds you of Joan of Arc, the young woman who was chosen by God to lead an army of French men against the English. If she followed her namesake, then Shaban would have taken over the company and remade ATN into one of those society if memes, if a liberal ran Fox News. But everyone in her daily life calls her by her nickname, Shiv, which means a small, concealed dagger, usually homemade, that is used to kill someone in a fast, quiet manner, which is exactly what she does to Kendall in the show's final minutes. Her name, Shiv Roy, literally means to stab the king.
But why does she do this?
My God, when did you get here?
I never left.
Well, we talked about how Kendall thought that he was the heir apparent, and Roman wanted his dad's approval. Now, what Shiv always wanted, though, was to be treated seriously, like she's one of the guys. She wanted her dad's approval, and he responded by nicknaming her Pinky, as in a soft pink girl, or the smallest, most useless finger on the hand. So Shiv never wanted to run the company. She wanted her dad's approval, which she could never have because she's a woman. Shiv at least has the emotional intelligence to acknowledge this at the funeral.
He was hard on women. You know, he couldn't fit a whole woman in his head.
Just look at how this world of men treats her pregnancy. Tom, at first, thinks that it's a weapon to be used against him.
Like, is that even true? Or is that like a new position or tactic.
And then everyone else sees it as a weakness. Roman mercilessly teases her about it, and Matsson flat out asks if she can do the job while having a baby.
You know what I've heard? That she's,
Matsson eventually sees her pregnancy as a weakness, opting for the strong man that put the baby inside of her.
Why don't I get the guy who put the baby inside her instead of the baby lady?
And then later, Roman says,
Or he played you like a big fiddle. Like a pregnant cello.
so Shiv realizes that she can never win this game, so she settles for a draw.
She has got this kind of non-victory, non-defeat.
She can't be a kingmaker, but she is a king killer. Actually, she's kind of literally a kingmaker because now her child will grow up to be the heir to this kingdom, with an emotionally distant mother and a power-hungry CEO, but hey, still that's something. Still, she's reduced to what she never wanted to be, the wife of a powerful man.
Yeah, but why would she even choose Tom to begin with? He stabbed her in the back.
Yeah, but she only ever respected Tom when he was mean to her, like when he won the game of Beastie. She's got some serious daddy issues where she only wants a man when she has to chase his affections. And Tom's outright rejection of her earlier in the episode guarantees that she will come running into his arms.
I just don't know.
Okay. Sure. All right. Bye.
Still, there's no affection to that handhold at the end of the episode. It's more like the two of them are engaged in a process, which is what Shiv wanted.
It would be so convenient.
The two of them are wearing black and in perfect silence, and it seems like more like they're going to a funeral and not restarting their life together. So that brings us to Tom, who a lot of you are going to think was the winner, but really, like I said, Connor's the winner, and I'm going to talk about why in just a second. See, Tom has no real power at the end of the episode. He's not even invited to the photo op with the Gojo crew, but that's what Matsson sees in Tom, a lackey who knows his place. Notice how he carefully studies Tom's reaction when he basically says he wants to make a cuckold out of him.
It's like she me too.
But since we're talking about everyone else's name, let's look at Tom's surname, Wombegans. Sophie Keem from Nameberry posted a video where she pointed out that this is a very obscure Germanic surname. So why was this name chosen for that character? She theorized, and I think she's right, that he is named after Bill Wombegans, a Cleveland second baseman whose most notable achievement in his career was completing the only unassisted triple play in World Series history. Guys, an unassisted triple play is like impossible to pull off. Not only do you have to be a skilled infielder, but events have to line up just perfectly for this to happen. Runners have to make mistakes. The ball has to land in the exact place. Just like Tom is skilled in the business world, but he also benefited from being at the right place at the right time. Though I will say that the best Tom scene in this episode was him and Greg having a slappy fight in Logan's bathroom, pelting each other with the stickers used to claim Logan's belongings. This felt so appropriate because the whole episode is about people trying to slap their claim on Logan's legacy, and because the succession is ultimately decided by a childish wrestling match. And if you were surprised that Tom kept Greg around, remember, in this show, shit always rolls downhill, and Tom is always in need of a new human footstool.
You're busted back down to Greg tonight.
No!
Yeah.
Now I think Connor's little auction proves what I said earlier. Even though he doesn't get to go to Slovenia, Connor has always been the winner in this show because he's the only one who never tried to be his father. Instead, he tried to do his own thing, running for president. It was a miserable humiliation, but at least he did it on his own terms.
But honestly, America, you flunked it. I guess you're gonna have to find some other poor mook's paps to suckle on.
But the key to this episode and Connor's victory is the video.
Virtual dinner with Pop.
This is the final tender moment that the kids share with their dad, and they weren't even there for it. Connor, though, was at the table with the old fogies, and this is all the kids ever wanted all along, to be invited to sit at their father's table as, if not equals, then at least as co-workers. This scene makes it clear that Logan was far more at ease with his business family than his actual family. He's having fun, letting his guard down, and singing.
Was spent among the last
In the scene, we see why the Roy kids strive to earn his affection. His kindness was fleeting, but irresistible.
When he let you in, when the sun shone, he was warm in the light.
It starts with Logan listing the presidential losers, because history never remembers the losers, but you can learn way more from the losers than you can from the winners. And then the song, Green Grow the Rashes O by Robert Burns. This is taught to Scottish school children, much in the way like America the Beautiful was taught to kids in America. The song says, "The worldly race may riches chase, and riches still may fly them. And though at last they catch them fast, their hearts can never enjoy them." In other words, you can chase the money and the riches, but they will never never actually make you happy. Earlier in the episode, the kid's mother warned them not to pursue the company, and now, in a way, their dad is doing the same thing, telling them that the riches of the company will never make them whole. But Kendall cannot hear this message. He can only hear the words of his father promising a 7-year-old boy the keys to his kingdom. And this takes us to that gorgeous final scene with Kendall aimlessly wandering through Battery Park at magic hour. Battery Park is the southernmost place in Manhattan, showing that Kendall has sunk to the bottom of the city. It's also the closest point to the Statue of Liberty, a symbol of hope for immigrants like his father. But the statue doesn't just symbolize hope for freedom, but hope for success, for wealth. The Statue of Liberty is like the promise of capitalism. And now, that's all that Kendall is left with. A promise. A promise that his dad made to him decades ago. A lot of people have speculated that Kendall would die by drowning in this episode, bringing him full circle, his comeuppance for the death of Andrew Dodds. And Kendall may not physically drown, I mean his bodyguard prevents that, but he is figuratively drowning in his own bullshit as Roman's words continue to haunt him. Remember what he told Shiv?
If I don't get to do this, I might die.
And in this final shot, he might as well be dead. Guys, that's just our thoughts on the ending of Succession. If you have any thoughts or theories, let me know in the comments below or at me on Twitter. And if it's your first time here, please subscribe, smash that bell for alerts. For ScreenCrush, I'm Ryan Airy.